The 2023 San Diego Padres, what happened to them, and why was it such a disaster season? Let's talk about it. Before we talk about 2023, let's talk about what they did in the 2022 season. At that year's trade deadline, they acquired Juan Soto to help them make a big playoff push.
Second time in 3 years, the Padres are going back to the postseason in 2022. San Diegans.
As we all know, the Padres finished with the 89-73 record, taking them to the playoffs to go up against the New York Mets in the Wild Card Series. In that series, the Padres won Game 1 and 3, advancing them to the NLDS, going up against one of the biggest rivals, the Los Angeles Dodgers. The regular season record for the Dodgers versus the Padres in that season was 14-5 in favor of the Dodgers, so this playoff matchup was going to be a run for the century. That series was definitely one to remember. Going to the Game 4, the Padres needed one more win to win the series, and Jake Cronenworth did this to take the lead.
Off the ball! 5-3 Padres!
And as we all know, in the top of the ninth, Josh Hader struck out Freddie Freeman to beat the Dodgers and send them to the NLCS championship.
The San Diego Padres are headed to the National League Championship Series.
Going into that series, the Padres had high hopes, believing that they could go to the World Series and beat the Philadelphia Phillies. Going into Game 5, the Padres were in a must-win situation, down 3-1 in the series, but unfortunately, this happened.
Suarez fires. Pop fly. Right field. Segura's out. Castellanos out. And the Philadelphia Phillies are going to the World Series.
After the loss to the Phillies in the NLCS, the Padres knew that they had to go into the offseason, get some more big pieces to get over the hump and go to the World Series. And this is what they did. The big free agents that the San Diego Padres signed were Seth Lugo, Nick Martinez to a 3-year deal, Nelson Cruz on a 1-year deal, $1 million contract. They also signed Michael Wacha, a recent almost MVP, Matt Carpenter, who had a bounce-back season with the Yankees, and their biggest transaction that whole offseason was Xander Bogaerts, signing him to an 11-year contract. With all the new players that the Padres just got in free agency, they also had Fernando Tatis, Juan Soto, Manny Machado, Blake Snell, Joe Musgrove, Jake Cronenworth, and many other great players. So going into the 2023 season, they had high expectations and knew that they were going to make the World Series that year. So now that we know what the Padres did in the offseason to get over the hump in the NLCS, why was their season such a failure, and what made them stand back from getting back to where they were the last season? To start off, Fernando Tatis was still serving his 80-game suspension that he got last season, and he missed the first month. So with this, the Padres started off the season 10-11, and they couldn't wait for Fernando Tatis to get back. Since Tatis has come back on April 20th to July 30th, the trade deadline, the Padres had a record of 55-56, only 3 games out of a playoff spot, but 9 games back of the Dodgers in the NL West. Many people would think that with Tatis' return, the Padres would have a better record than they had, 55-56. But let me talk about the stats that the players had throughout that whole time. Let's start with the big four, starting off with Tatis. From April 20th to the trade deadline, he hit .275, had 99 hits, 18 home runs, and 53 RBIs. Juan Soto was having a great season up until the trade deadline. He was hitting .285, had 84 hits, 16 home runs, and also 55 RBIs too. Manny Machado was also having a great season, hitting .265, had 73 hits, 19 home runs, and also 55 RBIs too. As you could tell, Tatis, Soto, and Manny Machado were having great seasons up until the trade deadline, but Xander Bogaerts was different. His stats from the beginning of the season to the trade deadline were he was hitting .246, 74 hits, 7 home runs, and 27 RBIs. So now that we know how the core four was doing up until the trade deadline, let's talk about the role players. Matt Carpenter was having an abysmal 172 batting average, 23 hits, 3 home runs, and also 21 RBIs. Nelson Cruz is having a .222 batting average, 22 hits, 3 home runs, and 11 RBIs. And Jay Cronenworth was having a abysmal .216 batting average, 66 hits, 5 home runs, and 30 RBIs up until the trade deadline. As you could tell, one of the biggest flaws in the lineup was clutch, as all the players besides the core 3, Soto, Tatis, and Manny Machado, they were all underperforming, and that's what led them to have the no clutch saying throughout the whole season. It also didn't help that your biggest free agent pickup, Xander Bogaerts, was not performing to his regular performance. He was only hitting .246, like we said, up until the trade deadline, and this was also one of the biggest problems with no clutch from Xander Bogaerts. So now that we know how the batting lineup was doing, let's talk about the pitching. Blake Snell was having an amazing season. He had an 8-5 record, 1.87 ERA, 135 strikeouts, and 18 appearances up until the trade deadline. Joe Musgrove was also having a great season that season too. He had a 10-3 record, 3.05 ERA, 97 strikeouts, and 16 appearances from the beginning of the season to the trade deadline. One of the biggest flaws in the starting rotation was Seth Lugo, one of their big free agency pickups. He had a 2-5 record, a 3.89 ERA, 62 strikeouts, and 12 appearances from the beginning of the season to the trade deadline also. Since the Padres had a 55-56 record at the trade deadline, only 3 games back of a playoff spot, they were in a no great situation because they didn't know if they were going to be sellers or buyers. So, at the trade deadline, they made a couple of minor moves. They acquired Rich Hill and Ji-Man Choi from the Pittsburgh Pirates. They also got a pretty great reliever, Scott Barlow. And to finish off the trade deadline, they acquired Garrett Cooper and Sean Reynolds from the Miami Marlins. Even though the Padres finished with 30-26 record to finish out the season, this was not enough for them to make the playoffs, finishing with an 82-80 record, and it was a dreadful season for them. So now that we know how the players did and performed throughout the season and their record, let's talk about more of the problems that the Padres had and why the season was such a failure for them. One of the big reasons why the Padres had an abysmal season was because they had so many injuries. Let's start out with Jay Cronenworth. Cronenworth was having an alright season, but a big factor on why he wasn't consistent was because he was injury prone, hurting his wrist, and he had to end the season with that injury. Another injury that held back the Padres was Manny Machado. Luis Campusano was out 2 months after needing thumb surgery on his catching arm. Seth Lugo landed on the injured list twice, which is why he had a bad season and wasn't able to perform like he was the season before. The biggest reason why the Padres season was a failure was because they put this on their video board right after they beat the Dodgers, and they were never the same after this. But in all honesty, the Padres had a great team that year, and if everything ran right, they could have went to the World Series. But as we talked about, their lack of performance, their less clutch in clutch times, and their injury-prone team that year led them to only having an 82-80 season, and that's what happened to the 2023 San Diego Padres.